Sort of like I was saying, the film is very much me sort of working out a lot of shit. I ended up channeling a lot of my own existential fears about the world and the future.
You're a very disappointing time traveler.
The sort of feeling of hopelessness that like maybe there just aren't levers available to the average person.
No, this is the plan. This is phase 1.
So what's phase 2?
Saving the world.
Glad somebody's on that.
Why make a time travel comedy if you're not gonna have some fun with fucking around with timelines and loops and stuff?
Some little differences can happen.
What if I just leave? What would happen to your little prediction then?
You can't leave.
Why?
But the mushy blob of reality just kind of congeals over the changes.
Wait.
And then
The time travel mechanics, when Rhys refers to it as sort of a mushy blob, once again, coming back to
time keeps on rocking.
the idea of the difficulty of trying to make a change in the world, trying to do something useful or valuable for the world, and the idea of like time itself and the nature of time itself being a thing that works against that.
Deals?
Yeah, I like to say congeals. When someone from the future tells you something important, stop!
Don't.
It's important!
The antagonists or the negative forces in the film pushing that idea, can't win, don't try. Like don't bother, you are not important, you cannot do this, it doesn't come down to you.
What if I was to tell you that everything does work out?
Prove it.
In my view, the future that is discussed in the film is one that is worth trying to change. There is other people who live in that future who probably would disagree.
Just relax! I'm from the future!
That's the name of the movie. It is. Wow, 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 wow.
Is it like with every small decision you create a whole new reality, like a multiverse with an infinite number of timelines?
No, that's ridiculous.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah, Erin?
Stasis or static?
I know it's a code. I know there's a code. Everything is fine, I promise.
The moment is mine.
How did you know that?
Well, I did write it. My name is Luke Higginson. The film is Relax, I'm from the future.
Wow, 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 wow.
I'm Eric Trommater.
I'm Erin Brown.
I'm Luke Higginson.
And this is Canadian cinema history. This week, our special guest, Luke Higginson from the Great White North, is going to take us through his 2022 comedy, Relax, I'm from the Future. Now, our hostess with the mostest, Erin Brown.
Relax, I'm from the Future is about a time traveler from the future, Casper, who comes back to the past and meets up with a burnt-out activist named Holly. Together, they have a scheme of winning lottery tickets and betting on sports and making a lot of money. But things don't turn out to be quite as simple as Casper makes it seem. So, Luke, does that about sum it up?
Yeah, I think that's a good setup for it. It goes some places from there, but we can talk about that as we come to it, I guess.
First off, where did you get the idea for this? This was really creative.
Thank you. Yeah, the idea was originally, I made a short film in 2013 that was just sort of a version of the rooftop conversation with Percy in the feature. And the impetus for that was just to sort of shoot something with my friends for out-of-pocket money. It was a fun little idea of sort of a time traveler with no real plan or schedule and can only really unload himself to people that are about to die. That concept just sort of turned into a little 5-minute short, which kind of did unexpectedly well, got into TIFF, people liked it, and I was encouraged to expand it into a feature. When I started trying to do that and figuring out how it would be a feature, I ended up kind of channeling a lot of my own existential fears about the world and the future and where we're headed, and it sort of ended up really becoming therapeutic for me to sort of work through my various anxieties and cynicisms about it.
I did like the short. That was really funny. Did you have any specific inspiration for the characters? I'm thinking Holly in particular, because she's so real. Did she come from anywhere in particular?
Yeah, sort of like I was saying, the film is very much me sort of working out a lot of shit that I was feeling and anxious about. So Holly is partially me. At the time of writing the film, I had already sort of like joined and been disillusioned with multiple sort of causes and movements, and I was really feeling the weight of that and the sort of feeling of hopelessness that like maybe there just aren't levers available to the average person to sort of affect any kind of meaningful change in the world. So that's a big part of her character. And then she's also largely based on an amalgam of two friends of mine who are a lot cooler and more interesting than me. So that's sort of, I'd say that's the genesis of Holly.
Yeah, she's a great character. I think she might be my favorite.
Oh, thank you.
And that's coming from a Rhys Darby fan. What about Percy? Where did he come from and what was the inspiration for his art?
The concept of him as an artist kind of came later because sort of, yeah, like I said, he grew out of the short, and initially he was sort of just supposed to be someone that was just sort of been broken by the world to a certain degree, and it ended up becoming a way to sort of, again, explore the idea of what it means to make art when no one cares about the art that you make, and what it means to make art that says something versus doesn't say something, and sort of all those sorts of ideas are what I was trying to explore with the Percy character. As with Holly, I mean, Gabrielle Graham brought so much to that character, and similarly, I think Julian Richings brought a lot to Percy. To sort of both of them made them real people, I think, in a way that went beyond what I had written.
So I'd like to ask about the casting. Like,
Sure.
How did that happen? Why Rhys Darby? not in a bad way. I'm just like
no. It's funny actually. All of the main cast came together in completely different ways. With Rhys, the craziest thing was that the film had started moving forward with someone else in the lead, and we got sort of a version of a green light with this other actor attached, and we started moving, and we had hired people, and we started doing stuff, and they punked out. They quit the film for reasons that I find pretty immoral, but it put us in a real spot, and it looked like the film might not happen. My amazing producers at Wango Films sort of did a mad dash search to find someone who could step in. I still can't believe the luck we got that it landed on Rhys Darby's manager's desk, and he read the script, and he thought it was really good for Rhys. And as soon as his name was floated as someone that might be able to do it, it was like Christmas Day. It was a huge step up from who we had before, and I was overjoyed. We had a Zoom meeting, me and Rhys, and he was delightful. Like the previous actor who had come on board, it was a sort of a long, fairly intense meeting to try and get them on board. And Rhys was just sort of delighted to come and delighted to join, and it was a preview of what he would be like to work with. Just an incredibly kind and professional man.
That's really good to hear. That's what he seems like, but
Yeah.
I don't actually know him, so I'm just seeing what he's putting out into the world. I would love to ask
But
who
you
the other
would
actor
say
is.
that now, wouldn't you, Erin?
Yeah, I would say that. I can't help it. Again,
The
no
very
hinges.
last tweet Erin ever put out on the artist formerly known as Twitter was, does anybody know if Rhys Darby is on Blue Sky? And I replied, that is the most Erin thing I have ever read in my entire life.
And it turns out he is. So there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I would love to ask who the other actor was, but you probably can't or don't want to say.
I do not feel comfortable saying. I'm sorry.
That is fair. I figured that would be the answer. So yeah.
But I'll leave
Did
it in the
recasting-
podcast so that if he accidentally listens, he'll know, because fuck him.
It's unlikely. But so did changing the actors on that role change how the character was presented? Did it change the direction of the character at all?
Not really. And actually, that was sort of one of the things that was so magical about it, is that Rhys's manager apparently said that he read it and it felt like it was in Rhys's voice already. And as soon as we heard his name, like I had been a huge fan of his from, Flight of the Conchords, What We Do in the Shadows. Like this was before Our Flag Means Death had come out. And I was a massive fan, but I hadn't thought of him for the role for whatever reason. And as soon as his name came up, we opened the script and started reading, and it was like, this is in his voice. You can hear him saying all these lines. It really felt magical. It felt perfect.
Well, there aren't a lot of actors that can be that likable, play dumb, and still, I think Michael Crawford would have been good in that role maybe back in the 1960s, like
Right.
in the Some Others Have 'Em, How I Won the War era, or The Knack. But I can't really think of anybody who's got Darby's talent set for that particular, being so incredibly likable, but able to play dumb so well. I can't imagine anybody else in that role, honestly.
The actor has to be inherently so likable because you have to be on board with them doing some pretty dodgy stuff. It was a real challenge in casting because there's to get even the sort of very limited budget that we had. You need someone that makes people interested in giving you some money for that, and there were a lot of names floated that we had potential access to that I had to shut down, even though they could have gotten the movie made, because it's like that movie is dead on arrival with that actor in it, but Darby was literally perfect.
The film begins, you were shooting with one camera. It seems like when Darby and Graham get together, you move to a 2-camera setup. Was that because of the chemistry between the two? Because we all know that Darby is known for his improvisation. Was that better to catch that, or was there something you had planned all along since you were also the editor?
No, you're exactly right. We changed the shooting plan once we knew Darby was on board to get that second camera for exactly the reason that you say, that he's one of the best improv artists in the world, and it would be foolish to not want to be able to catch anything that he does from both angles. But also for pure time reasons, like I said, he came in sort of last minute. He had very little time with the script. We had very little time to prep with him. We had him for 15 days. He's in basically every scene in the movie, and it's a lot of material, a lot of lines, a lot of monologues. He did a fantastic job learning his lines, but there's only so much you can do in such a short time. And so we also, just for speed, the second camera became an essential part of it, which was sort of on a certain level a sacrifice, because it was not how I had planned to shoot the film, but you gotta maximize what you have.
That seems to have led to that split screen where he's walking through the bunker doing things. You're seeing him from 2 angles at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I loved that. I thought that was great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So how much was he able to improvise on this, or was it limited because there wasn't that much time?
Yeah, I mean, not huge chunks, but I would say every scene there's sort of a line, or if not a line, an action or a look, or like he did the script and he sort of did the lines as written, but he would play, and he knew that I was very open to him playing, and anytime he felt the urge, I encouraged it. Also, in addition to us having an incredibly tight timeline, we were shooting in December in Hamilton, Ontario, which is chilly, and in places like on rooftops and in the middle of the woods. And
I bet someone from New Zealand found that just wonderful.
He was very cold. I felt very bad for him. And like I've said, he was an absolute trooper. He did not complain, but like you could tell that he was very cold. And so I think that in some scenes maybe limited him a little bit in wanting to just sort of go off and riff. But there's many of my favorite jokes in the movie are Rhys originals. He's hilarious. He's incredibly funny and so like quick and sharp.
That comic chemistry between him and Gabrielle Graham as Holly, was that something you also saw offset? It felt like a friendship. We were watching a real life friendship being formed.
Yeah, I know. I feel so good about that. like I mentioned, all of the main cast came together in different ways. Gabby coming in as Holly, when it looked like things might actually happen, I was like, that's who I want. I want Gabrielle Graham to play Holly. I had seen her in Brandon Cronenberg's film Possessor, which she has a small role in, but she just absolutely pops off the screen. And after seeing her in that, and she actually in that movie plays a character named Holly, which sort of kind of blew my mind. And then I looked up some of her comedy work that she had done, and I could see that she had comic timing and could deliver a joke. And so I didn't audition anyone else for Holly. I just offered it to Gabby, and I'm very grateful that she took it. They met each other for the first time the day before we started shooting, and Rhys had just flown in. And he was jet lagged, and he was very generous to sort of give me a little bit of time of just him and Gabby in a room together, because I wanted them, before we had cameras rolling, to just sort of be in each other's presence and run some lines and sort of get a feel for each other. But I had to go on faith that they would have good chemistry, and I will always remember the moment when they first got together. They're both very nice people. They sort of said hello and chatted a bit, but we ran lines for a couple lines that ran through a couple scenes, just sort of super rough, and it wasn't quite there, and I was a little nervous. And so we talked about the characters a little bit and what they sort of saw in each other and wanted from each other. And I remember the moment so clearly. It just clicked. We just then after that, we ran the scene in Percy's living room when they're holding Percy hostage. And what you see in the movie just happened. Like, it just, they slid into it, they locked into it. And from then on, they just had this amazing chemistry. And it's very funny. They're such different people. And they've talked about that. Like, they have very little in common, but they liked each other and they clicked, and it was really cool. It was maybe the thing I'm happiest with in the whole movie.
Their relationship really, honestly, it made the film for me. There's a lot of things about the film that I loved, but that was just seeing those two together doing their thing. That was really great.
Me too.
So other casting, you have Julian Richings as Percy, and Janine, I hope I pronounced this right, Theriault?
Yeah, I believe so. Julian Richings, I've been a fan of his for a very long time. We were sort of all talking together and throwing out potential names for Percy, and we all just sort of decided that Julian would be an amazing get if we could get him. And so I literally just recorded a video of myself begging him to be in the movie and sent it to his agent. And
had he done comedy before? Because I always associate him with horror movies.
It's true. And I mean, that's the thing, is I think he sometimes gets cast sort of for his look versus for his acting ability. And he's a really fucking good actor. Like, he can do a lot of things. Hardcore Logo was a huge movie for me when I was a teenager, and so I've always loved him from that. But yeah, he can be very funny, and he's literally the nicest man I've ever met. He's just an absolute sweetheart and a brilliant actor. And yeah, it was huge honor to get him. And then Janine is the only one of the like major cast members that we did sort of open auditions for. And I just watched, it was COVID times. So I just watched a lot of tapes, which is, I definitely not preferable to live auditions. I'd always prefer to do a live audition, but with the roles for Doris, it was interesting how many actors, upon getting the sides, and this is on me, not on them, but it was interesting how few of them seemed to understand that it was a comedy. Like, we just got lots of actors for that role sort of reading it as if it was sort of a Law and Order episode, and it was sort of a strange experience to watch those. And Janine just was one of the few people who just immediately got the tone of it, and so it was a fairly easy choice.
Doris is a really funny character. I love how over the top she is. I think that was just another thing that makes the film so great. So yeah, Eric, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say the way that you shoot Doris's scenes is excellent, because of course it separates her from the rest of the of the
Hmm.
film. That opening shot where you've got the high overhead shot of her with the mask and her eyes open, which
Hmm.
just in terms of just the color balance, everything about that shot is just absolutely perfect. And then when you have the screen where it looks like it's the camera on a hi-hat or something, so you have a high overhead on one side and the camera looking up on the other, but they both but the actual horizon line for the ceiling and the floor are at the exact same spot.
Hmm.
I was like, okay, he's just showing off at this point. But
Thanks, man.
what's great about this film is it's comic timing, not just in the performances, but this was somebody who had obviously edited many, many films and knows how to time comedy. But how much of this was was as a director were you thinking as an editor?
That is very kind of you. Thank you. I do think if I have a strength as a director, it is that I think of the edit as I'm going all the time, and it's helpful when you have such limited time to know what you need, and you still don't get everything that you need, but like it's I think about that a lot, and thank you.
Is that why you shot so much with telephotos? So you'd have an easier edit between the shots, so that the focal lengths would match, and you would have the out of focus low depth of field, so you didn't have to worry about matching backgrounds quite as much. Which is something I think, if that is why, great. But I also think that telephotos work much better, I think, for comedy than wider angles, because the camera is further away, and so you don't feel like they're in your face. So it was a
Yes.
great choice for whichever reason it was.
Thank you. Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. We lost it similarly to how we lost our actor less than a month before shooting. We also lost our cinematographer a week before shooting. One of the most stressful experiences of my life. Both because of switching to Rhys and moving to the 2 camera setup, and because of having to switch a DP last minute. A lot of the shooting plan that I'd spent a lot of time on had to basically go out the window. So a lot of stuff that was happening on set was sort of like figuring it out as we were going. And but you're right about the telephotos, and we had a lot of things like much of what we shot in the woods was not geographically next to each other, and same with some other key elements. So yes, the ability to cut between, let's say, less than ideal on-set circumstances was a big part of the decision making.
If I don't make one nerdy reference to lensing in this episode, read your letters, because that's what I'm known for.
I appreciate it. The plan was actually to shoot initially was to shoot anamorphic, largely because we had such cramped space in a couple places, and we ended up not being able to do that. And part of me
Shorter lenses make a set look bigger, so to speak.
exactly weren't able to do that, but I think it worked out reasonably
But it's
well.
interesting, if I can go a little more nerdy though, when you go with kind of a mid-range, even like a 50mm lens, like seen when you're looking out of the diner when the basketballs come down. We've gotten so used to the telephotos that it feels like a lot wider shot than it is, and it's only because the horizon is still out of focus, out of the depth of field range, that you realize. Or the rooftop scene where you've got, it looks like a wide angle shot, but because it's meant to duplicate whether it was a cell phone or a video recorder, but you can tell by the horizon that you actually shot that with a very low depth of field lens. And then you see why when you're editing from that to the close-ups, so that you can keep the background the same. And it really reinforces the comedy, I think, because if you had Rhys Darby in a wide angle shot, he would have been literally like a couple inches from the camera and a couple inches from the audience's face, and that might have been just too much. The likability would have gone out the window. That, like, I think of those old Jerry Lewis movies where he used to shoot with those 23, 24mm lenses, and he's like, "Hey, lady," right in front of your face, and I was like, "Yeah, I the French love him. I hate him."
I think Rhys is a lot more likable than Jerry Lewis, but I take your point. Yeah.
So it was a lucky accident then.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I got to give a lot of credit to my DP, to Russ Young. Like I said, had to come in with insanely low levels of preparation, and really, I think the movie wouldn't exist without him. He was great.
And the set and costume designers are very helpful, I think, as well.
Oh yes, yes.
This has the same look all the way through, and you could see there's almost zero color correction, which you as an editor had to have loved.
Well, it's funny you say that. The set and costume stuff was very much planned with the thing that was sort of always the plan was to sort of have our characters be these sort of bright pops of color in a gray world, with exceptions of like when you're in Holly's sort of cozy warm space and stuff. But there was actually quite a bit of color correction done to sort of try to achieve that and maximize that. But you're right, all of the choices in terms of production design and costume were made to lean into that.
Erin, I'm done being nerdy. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to switch to a different kind of nerdiness, mostly about budgeting, because my first film, my budget was pizza and donuts for the cast and crew.
Yep.
So, if you don't mind my asking, what was the budget for this and how did you get it?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say, and we got that almost entirely through pre-sales to certain territories, based on the script and the attachment first of one actor and then of Rhys. And so with that, we were able to leverage tax credits for shooting in Hamilton and Toronto to sort of make up the rest of the budget. In Canada, we have a funding body called Telefilm that gives money to a lot of films that get made in Canada. We did not get that money, so we had to sort of find some creative ways to finance it.
And you don't have the 100% write-off anymore the way you did in the Bob Clark era.
No, oh man, what a time!
What a time! What a wild and lawless period of Canadian film that was.
Beautiful. Bring it back.
Porky's had to ruin it by making $100 million.
Yeah.
I've got questions about things that actually happened in the film itself, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, stasis or static? Why is that the code? Does that mean anything in particular?
Yeah, the film is sort of all about the idea of whether you can change anything and whether it's worth trying to change anything, whether it's worth trying to make a better future, or whether it is better to try and just coast along and do nothing and try to enjoy your life as best you can. Many things in the script sort of go back to that central idea. And so, yeah, that is what the idea is. Stasis or static. Her whole goal, her whole mission is to maintain a kind of stasis, and to eliminate anything that might cause static. That's the genesis for why that. And I just wanted the password, the code, to be something that sort of was cryptic sounding. So that was the decision for that. And then the answer, "the moment is mine," is sort of a reference to an ability to actually take control of the time and the life that you live.
It's a different meaning of the word static than what I thought it was. Like I was thinking static, staying still.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Because I mean, I guess in that sense, they both mean staying still, right? Like stasis and static.
So I was
a
little confused about that, but that makes more sense thinking static is in interference. That makes a lot more sense to me now.
What's the frequency, Kenneth?
How did Casper know Betty? How did he know when she was going to die?
He sort of talks about the information that he has being this sort of like patchwork of very specific information without a lot of context around it. He has a few obituaries. He has sort of access to dates and names, and does some sort of cross-referencing to figure out, who he can talk to. And that's why sort of Betty, he gets stuff from all the people in the retirement home, but Betty is his is his go-to person, is the one person that he feels comfortable sort of explaining things to, because he knows that she's not at risk of going off and spreading that around.
I was wondering if she was like an ancestor or something, but that obviously you know better than I do. That's
Like an
interesting.
ancestor of his?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I like that. But no, that's not what I was thinking.
Yeah.
But it could be. That could be your canon. I like that.
Yeah. That's headcanons all around.
Yeah.
It's like when I get the words wrong, I'm always like, well, I like my version better.
For sure, 100%.
And who is he writing to? Is he just writing a diary, or is it notes for future generations?
Yeah, those are the voiceover you hear is him leaving notes that he's burying in his radiation holes, that he's using his nuclear semiotics trick to the sort of the thing that you and I guess this is to whatever degree we have not spoiled anything, spoiler warning, but that is sort of one of the reveals at the end, is that much as he has been sort of burying these artifacts for the future, he has also been burying these notes, which are intended to lead any future time travelers who might come and try to stop what Holly is doing, lead them to him instead, which is sort of what is happening at the end of the film.
Okay.
When you were originally writing the script, did you have this ending in mind, or was it kind of the high concept comedy that it is for the first 70 minutes or so, and the decision was made to go with to add these kind of complications?
No, I mean, it was always a version of this. I tweaked the details of how the ending happened, but it was always some version of it. It was always I feel like why make a time travel comedy if you're not going to have some fun with fucking around with timelines and loops and stuff. And again, that idea of wanting to go back and try again to fix something, and whether you can fix anything and whether it's worth trying to fix anything, all of that is just sort of stuff that felt like fertile ground to use time travel to explore. So that was sort of always a part of it. I also like abrupt, harsh tonal shift things in movies. So like that there was always going to be some darkness to the ending as well.
It does get dark really, really quickly. Mm-hmm. But back to your time travel thing, it is an interesting kind of trick you play on the viewer, in which you have pretty much all of your time travel yada yada over.
Yeah.
And every single one of those things then comes back to haunt the characters.
Yeah.
And I thought that was I thought that was very, very clever, because I was just kind of thoroughly convinced, because I was just enjoying it as a comedy. I was like, well, enjoy this film. Don't think that this is the director saying don't think too much about it. And then you have, the last, I would say 15 minutes is all about, oh, you should have been thinking about it.
Thank you. I mean, it's I thought it was fun. I thought it was a fun thing to do. And yeah, like that initial description of the time travel mechanics, when Rhys refers to it as sort of a mushy blob, is once again coming back to this idea of like imagining the idea of the difficulty of trying to make a change in the world, trying to do something useful or valuable for the world, and the idea of like time itself and the nature of time itself being a thing that works against that, was an idea that I thought was sort of both kind of darkly funny and narratively useful / interesting.
I like the idea that there were only 120 people that could change the world, but Holly wasn't one of them, but she knows where they are. So like that should make her one of them,
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. It's I mean, yes, I think the implication of the film is that she will become a person that is changing the world, that she is going to expand that number through her actions. That line about the 120 people who can really change things is another example of sort of the antagonists or the negative forces in the film underlining that idea, or really pushing that idea of the fact that like can't win, don't try. Like don't bother. You are not important. You cannot do this. It doesn't come down to you. And I think that's a very tempting and attractive idea in a lot of ways. If you are someone who thinks about the state of the world, to just sort of give up because of an inability to do anything. And so, yeah, that is the thing that the film is about and pushing against.
That's a very hopeful message for especially the way the world is right now.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think that's all the questions that I have. Eric, you got some?
Maybe I'm reading too deep into this. When you have Doris talking to her psychiatrist about how the Spanish would send people to keep track of the colonies, knowing full well they couldn't go back, you talk about the future version of the Calvinist elect, basically, this 120 people. And then you have, spoiler alert, Casper of the future meeting Casper of the present, and Casper of the future, in very typical Habsburg fashion, has forgotten nothing and learned nothing. When you say this was a film that you made because of your nervousness about the future or anxieties about the future, the past is now, as opposed to the past is the future, was a theme that I picked up, especially with this idea of there being this elect, this 120, because of course there's two elects, spoiler alert. You had those who somehow either went underground or into space during the destruction in 54 years and came back and rebuilt. First, am I reading too deep into that? And second of all, it's no coincidence, is it, that none of the terrorists who are sent back in time are people of color, right? Because they didn't make it in your dystopian future. Am I wrong?
You are not reading too deeply into that, no. And it was also, there's a reason that Gabby plays Holly. It's the kind of thing that, as a cishet Caucasian man, I don't want to do too much sort of in terms of monologuing about or soapboxing on, because it's not really my place. But that is, it's a thing.
Like Eric was saying, future Casper didn't learn anything.
Yep.
But present Casper was taught by Holly after he finished. I love that. That's a new thing that a new layer to this film. Those are all of my questions. Eric, do you have any more questions, or do you want to turn it over to Dawn?
Well, I'm going to turn it over to the panel in just a minute. We're going to take 5 minutes because this is a history of cinema podcast. And I am going to kind of talk about what, growing up in Michigan with Channel 2 coming out of Ontario, what my vision of Canadian film history is, and then have you correct me. I know Canadian films a lot for animation. I know a lot for documentaries. I did a paper back in high school about the Canadian version of the Red Scare and the Blacklist, when the earlier version of the Canadian Film Board attempted to fire anyone that said anything nice about communist China or Russia in any way, shape, or form. So I do know that part of history. I can't name any great Canadian films from that time period. But I can from the 60s, because I was a fan of the English, what they call kitchen sink drama or social realism, and a lot of Canadian films that were shown on Channel 2 came out of that. They weren't very well acted usually. They didn't usually have very good production values, but very good writing. And then, of course, I think of the people who we keep joking about Bob Clark, but he is the top grossing Canadian filmmaker of all time. Because of A Christmas Story and Porky's. But I guess Black Christmas was
Christmas did well,
was a pretty big hit. But you think of John Hossis or Jack Darkus or those people. You mentioned his son, but Cronenberg Shivers is not the film he's remembered for. He's remembered for mostly his American which is too bad, because I actually think it's all downhill after Shivers myself. But
Oh, come on. Videodrome saw the future, man. You got to give Videodrome credit.
The whole putting the videotape in the stomach, just like Naked Lunch is the same way, where it just like there's something just uncanny valley, I guess, about the special effects.
Oh, I love them. I love them. Agree to disagree.
Well, it happens. It happens. But you know what? Maybe it deserves a rewatch because I haven't seen it in probably 20 years. And it still had dated badly for me. But I think Larzan's Night Zoo. You know those are the films that I think about
Sure.
out of that era. When let's say when the tax credits ended and the Wild West was done, I do think of a lot of cinema that came out of the Quebecois,
Yep.
the French Canadian. I don't really think of a lot of great film. There was a time in the 2000s where they tried to sell us on Paul Gross.
Oh, yeah.
This is Canada. And Erin and I were talking before everybody showed up. He's a beautiful looking man. He looks like Alain Delon and James Dean had a baby. But is Men with Brooms considered a good movie in Canada, or Hyena Road, or that?
No.
I didn't think so. Okay.
No one likes those movies.
Or what was that? What was the World War One film that he made that had like 9 subplots?
Passchendaele. Yeah.
And I wonder if that has something to do with the government financing element, that maybe they're trying to sell, whereas the Quebecois seem to have a localized film industry. They'll take $20 million and make 10 films. That maybe they're this idea of making one film for $20 million and trying to sell it to the Americans is not the most creative route. That would be my idea of Canadian history. So tell us what I missed.
I mean, you're doing pretty good, and there's a lot, I will admit, of sort of pre 70s Canadian film history that I'm badly ill educated on. It's to be honest, not an area that I've ever really explored or been super interested to explore, but I'm sure there's lots of gems that I have missed out on. I really, as a young person, I got very into and excited by the sort of the quote unquote Toronto new wave of the 90s, of the sort of the indie filmmakers, the Bruce McDonalds, the Don McKellars, like that wave of sort of punky, grungy stuff really appealed to me when I was like 12, 13. It's a big inspiration for me. But I mean, I think you're right. I think Quebec has largely sort of dog walked the rest of Canada in terms of its ability to make good and interesting films. I think there's been some improvement in the last few years, but
Your film come out, that was an improvement all into itself.
You're right. That's the high watermark. I mean, no, I'm not talking about that at all. Yeah, it's tricky. I would not put it at the feet of the government funding. I mean, Quebec films also get government funding, and they've made some really good stuff. I think it has more to do with sort of a lack of interest in sort of in building our own identity and in sort of promoting our own work. There's very little money for either development or release. Like I to sort of simplify it, I would love it if the Canadian funding bodies sort of behaved more like they were independent studios and tried to actually like have a voice and a style and get some stuff out there, as opposed to, I think there was a period, as you say, in the early 2000s where it was particularly kind of dire in terms of trying to fund a cheap looking version of American blockbusters with kitschy Canadian attitudes, and those all landed with a thud. That was probably the bleakest time for Canadian film that I can think of.
But stop trying to make Paul Gross a thing. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, man, you're preaching to the choir. I agree. But I do think there's a lot. There's some very interesting Canadian filmmakers that have come up in the last sort of 5 years or so that I'm excited about. But yeah, it's a struggle. It's not the industry up here is strange. It's very strange, and does not behave in a way that you would assume. Does not behave in a way that allows for a lot of recognition of the work that's done up here.
That was a great answer because it agreed with me. No, I'm joking. So of course I loved it. No, Erin, back to you, oh hostess with the mostess.
Let's go ahead and turn it over to questions. So if anybody's got a question, just remember to stay muted when you're not talking, and just go ahead and jump in.
We seem to have lost Hillary and Dawn, so
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I saw that.
good friend of the podcast, Sila Blume.
Good afternoon or good morning. I don't know where all of you are, but I am not familiar with this type of film. And some of you, well, specifically Eric, will know that this is not really what I tend to watch. But I was very interested in the language and the style of comedy, for which I also have very little experience, comedy, even though I could be funny. I really enjoyed it. That, for me, that's the key that I wanted to convey. I enjoyed this. What is the concept of Doris in what she's doing and trying to destroy everybody that comes here?
She describes herself as a sentinel, which is this idea of the people in the future, which, as we've sort of established, is to some degree mutable. They understand, sends Doris and people like her to our time to stop people kind of like Casper, but people like Casper who have a little more intentionality behind them than he does. To stop the possibility of change is basically her mandate.
I thought of them as kind of future terrorists because they say terrorists twice in the film.
Well, to the old adage, right? One person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter, right? Like, I mean,
okay, future freedom fighters. Then, gosh, we don't want to be politically incorrect to terrorists.
I think it's
oh boy, I don't want those letters because they probably have anthrax.
I'm pretty sure this version of terrorist is like the American government's current version of terrorist, which is we don't like your tattoos and we're going to send you to El Salvador.
Exactly.
I think that's it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's we don't know the full intentions of these people, but in my view, the future that is sort of discussed in the film is one that is worth trying to change. There is other people who live in that future who probably would disagree, but yeah, sorry, I'm not sure if I've answered your question.
Specifically, when you were talking a few minutes ago about the layers that you can think about or intellectualize about of Holly being Black. When we go to the future, I don't think it really matters if it is 50 years ahead or 150 years ahead, because mostly we cannot know what will be. I don't think we could have told in 1999 what was going to be like in 2025, even though it's only 26 years difference. So in terms of the political concept of conserving something or being more open to something, I find it very difficult to consider this idea of the film, specifically of Doris, with the terminology we use today, because I don't think that's relevant in 50 years and even less in 150 years, even though the film talks about that. But I find interesting that we cannot really, or I feel that we cannot really talk about the state of Holly being Black in this time, as opposed to her being Black in that same role 50 years from now. And in the same way, I find it difficult to use any political term when referring to which side is Doris on as to the people coming from the future. The language we use today cannot ever be applied to even 30 years from now.
Sure. Yes. Agreed. And that's a thing that I think is interesting to think about. And
well, and an interesting follow-up, of course, is that she asks who you're preserving the future for.
Yes. Exactly.
As opposed to asking the question that they want you to ask, which is, how are things in the future? Yeah, but she asked the right question, for whom?
Yes.
she should not be asking a question. She is asking a question based on what she thinks today and we think today, where she cannot know how in 50 years we will think in order to even think of asking that question, because she cannot know what she would think about even herself in 50 years.
Right. I mean, I think that's interesting. I don't think I agree, because she does know that a certain sort of cross-section of people allowed a much larger cross-section of people to be sacrificed in order to create this sort of more comfortable future. I think she's extremely valid in questioning who makes that decision and for whom, who gets to be in which stratosphere.
Yeah, that's a fair argument.
I agree that it's interesting to think about, and I am glad that it spurred that thinking.
I'm Christopher Vincelet. I am a content creator of various forms across various mediums, so especially YouTube, Twitch, and various other social media apps. So my question is, as a filmmaker in short form myself, I also sometimes try to work through my own internal questions, thoughts, ponderings, concerns through a creative lens. And I guess a question that I wanted to ask you, if you're comfortable with sharing, is at what point, was there a point, and if so, what point, that you had to kind of review, update, and revise the material that you were putting together to be less kind of inside your head and more accessible to a wider audience? Is that something that you felt you had to consider, or was it really more, I'm going to make this kind of really for me, and then if it finds an audience, great? Like, how do you do that, working it, being a way for you to work through your own kind of inner monologue versus making it something out there consumable for the masses that hopefully they will find entertaining enough to watch, ponder, question, and discuss with other people?
I started writing it very much in a place of just trying to get out what I was feeling, and like therapeutically put out stuff that I was feeling onto the page, and then sort of form it into conversations. And then I wanted to make a film that I thought was funny and that I thought was entertaining. And so it was very much, it was a long process. I started from that, and then I sort of tried to focus it and whittle it down and make it less didactic as much as possible. And look, there's some people that would argue I did not succeed. It was a priority for me that it said the thing that I wanted it to say. And with, as long as it did that, I wanted to sort of make it as fun by my standards as I could. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's a fair answer. I mean, anytime you're going to touch on social issues, especially social issues that are particularly poignant and relevant in that moment of release, I think there's always that, at least for me, that question of how much am I making this for me versus how much am I making this for others? And either way, to your point, yeah, always want to be proud and willing to stand by what the output is, right? Don't want to necessarily pander and cater, but at the same time, I don't want folks to just shut it off that are maybe going to be initially turned off by it. Like for me,
Yeah.
for example, I love a good sci-fi story,
Mm-hmm.
especially love a good time travel story. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to kind of hold on to the end, unless it's pretty egregious with agenda and stuff,
Sure.
to see a good story, because I can put it in the lens of these characters, this world, these possibilities, just suspend disbelief, let the storyteller tell their story, then ponder and criticize after. But some people will just be like, oh, it's about a liberal. Oh, it's about a conservative.
Mm-hmm.
Off.
Yeah.
So
I've gotten some of those reviews. I've read some of those.
I'd say that I think that's the great trick you pull in your film is it seems like a typical, very high concept comedy for its first at least hour and 10 minutes, and then when you flip the switch, boy, it gets dark really, really fast.
It does.
And so we're already in.
Just to add on to what I was just saying there, to further answer your question, I guess, I think the trick is with that is to, as opposed to trying to make your film to be a sort of a prescription for any specific thing, it is like, I would not think that anyone would watch my film and be like, oh, good, that one has all the answers. Like it is very much a representation of my feelings. And that is, I think, if you're going to say something about stuff that is in the world or whatever, I think kind of the only way to do it is to just explore your feelings about it rather than, be prescriptive, if that makes sense.
I think you're right about comedy being the way to get your point across, because that's been something that since before Charlie Chaplin. I mean, it's with The Great Dictator, that was let's make fun of Hitler.
Discovered by a Canadian, Max Sennett. Just saying.
Yeah. But I mean, satire's been around forever, and you can really change a lot of minds with comedy. That's just throwing that out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dawn had a question. She had to leave. She was on an editing deadline, and something happened. you know how that is.
I do.
But she had a question about how much you were involved personally in the distribution of this film. And obviously distribution in Canada is completely different than it is in the United States. You don't have to shop it to a bunch of film festivals and hope that somebody picks it up for distribution, do you? I mean,
yeah.
Oh my God, it's exactly the same. Shock face.
Absolutely.
Shock.
Yeah, no, we like I said, to get the budget, we had done a few pre-sales. So there were a few territories that sort of had the rights to it, but North America and a few other places we were going to festivals, like we were submitting to festivals to attempt to sell it. That's what we did. And it's a terrifying thing to do.
She's, I think, more concerned because, of course, she's about to go through that nightmare herself with the film that she's working on. She's more concerned about how you got it into film, the difference between Canada as opposed to the similarity, which is they're both a nightmare.
Right. Well, I mean, look, I will say we didn't do particularly well in the U.S. film festivals. Our big break, the one that was best for us was Fantasia in Montreal, which is a fantastic festival, and I love that festival, and they were very good to us, and that's where we made our sales.
French speakers have great taste in movies, except Jerry Lewis.
Is Jerry Lewis big in Montreal? I think that might be a France thing. I don't know. I don't know.
I'm saying French speakers as a whole have great taste in movies. Because, they like
Quebecers would take a lot of issue with that lumping in.
They like the same kind of noir films that I like. Well, no, because the whole Quebec New Wave was just a copy of the French New Wave in Canada. I mean,
woof.
No, I'm screwing. I'm screwing with you. I'm screwing with you. I absolutely love Quebec. I already said that I think Quebec makes better films than the rest of Canada combined. So, I don't have to kiss their ass anymore. Plus, they don't even speak English. They're not listening. like making fun of the Amish, right?
Aren't they supposed to speak both, though, in Canada? You got two languages officially?
You are officially, yeah. In practice, my wife's bilingual, but my French is not is embarrassing.
Go into Montreal and tell somebody they're supposed to be bilingual. I'm waiting.
I wouldn't do that. And they probably wouldn't understand. Well, they would understand me. I wouldn't understand them because the French that I learned was high school American. We're speaking Parisian French, and I don't speak it well. So,
well, depending on who you speak to, they would either appreciate the effort or be incredibly mad at you. So, and it's impossible to know until you try.
And then I'd be worried that I'd be making them mad because there's my anxiety for you.
Yeah.
But then if they were mad at me, I wouldn't understand what they were saying anyway. So
yeah.
Erin and I are both big fans of a history podcast called The History of England, and we're constantly reminded that Edward III was the best King of England because he killed the most Frenchmen. So, I'm going to throw that one out there for Quebecers. We're not all, we're not frog happy here as well. Matter of fact, the only French film we did was La Cage aux Folles. we haven't covered any.
Okay, and that was mine.
and that was yours, yes, Erin. We've done Italy, we've done Mexico, we've done a lot of Germany, but we never haven't quite made it to France yet. We'll get there. One day when they make a good movie. No, I'm kidding. All right, that's that. I think we got enough humor, don't we, Erin? If I edit that right,
I think so. If people find it funny, which I hope they do. Hey, Eric, what are we doing next week?
Next week, we're going back to Italy. We're going to look at a 1963 film from Mario Monticelli called The Organizers, starring Marcello Mastroianni. And the reason for this is because I feel like it was a huge influence on the film that we did last week, C'è ancora domani. Thank you for the 90 people who corrected me on my pronunciation of Italian, which stinks. So join us next week. Erin, where can people find you on the internet?
I am on Blue Sky as Toad Puppy at toadpuppy.bluesky.social.
Sila Blume, same question.
I do most of my work on silablume.life.
Christopher, same question.
Folks can find me across various social medias as Just Me DashV, all one word. You can also check me out on Linktree, and I have it updated with all my socials. Hope to see you there.
And last but definitely not least, Luke Higginson. Where can people find you on the internet?
You can harass me. I'm Borrowed Time Media on Instagram, and I'm Luke Higginson on Blue Sky, and I am unfortunately still on Twitter at Luke Cuts Video.
Well, thank you very much for being here, Luke. That was it was a great episode. Thank you, Erin, for doing a great job hosting. Thank you, dear friend of the show, Sila Blume, and thank you, Dash. This is we appreciate you coming along. Thank you also to Don Fields and Hillary, who were taken away for various reasons. We'll catch you next week for Monticelli's The Organizer. And again, Mark Redfield, a dear friend of the podcast, we do ask you to please continue to keep him in your thoughts and prayers, whichever the case may be. Thank you very much, and have a great night.
In the year 2525, if man is still alive, if woman can survive, they may find. In the year 3535, ain't gonna need to tell the truth, tell no lies. Everything you think, do, and say is in the pill you took today. In the year 4545, ain't gonna need your teeth, won't need your eyes. You won't find a thing to chew. Nobody's gonna.
Again, I feel like I should have been funnier. I'm sorry. I feel like I got very serious.
You were great. You were great. Thank you so much for doing this.
We have that effect on people. It's the nerdiness. You feel like you can't cut loose with us because somebody's gonna butt in and say, yeah, but actually, what happens is, so it's not actually funny on that level, now is it? And so it's not really your fault. It's not you. It's us.
Well, it was. I had a good time. So thank you very much for having me.
Well, you know what? There's an open seat for you there anytime you want. Luke, you see a movie and you're like, hey, World Cinema History should cover that. You just email me and there'll be a seat right there for you.
Thank you very much. That's a nice offer.
Yeah.
I may take you up.
But otherwise, thank you, everybody. Sila, Erin, Chris. By the way, your guys' mic levels were excellent. I really appreciate that. You getting that mic right up close to your face. I don't care about the pops and the peas. I just care about if people can fucking hear you, and you guys did a great job of that. What you said, I don't know. I wasn't paying attention, but I'll find out when I'm edited. I'm sure it's great.
We were just insulting your mother. That's all.